Hi there! Welcome back to another video on my channel. Today I wanted to talk about neurodivergence in writing, how sometimes neurodivergence actually shows up in your writing, and how sometimes being a little bit neurodivergent or having some sort of mental disability actually makes writing a bit harder. This is inspired by the Audra Winters conversation, but I'm not going to be talking about her really in this video, other than the fact that people became more interested in this topic because of her. So, as somebody who is neurodivergent myself, I just wanted to give a little bit of insight to folks who might not be. So if you're interested in all of that, just keep on watching. For those of you who might not know me, hi, my name is Cassidy. I am an independent author. I have been self-publishing for a couple years now. I have 4 books out in the market currently, and I'm working on my 5th. So that's a little bit about me. And guess what? I also am neurodivergent. Woohoo! I have been diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder and maybe some other things. I haven't been officially diagnosed yet, but I am looking into maybe getting a screening or two for something else. But anyway, I have bipolar 2 disorder. I am now medicated for it. I've been on medication since the beginning of this year, and it's definitely changed the way I perceive the world and get things done and have relationships with folks. So I just wanted to give my own 2 cents about this conversation happening about neurodivergent writers, the quality of their writing, and whether or not somebody's disability can impede their work. This video was actually inspired by a comment that was left on my Audra Winters video. If you haven't seen that, if you want to know more about the drama, just click on the screen somewhere. I'll have a link. Yeah, this was inspired by that because at one point in time, when receiving critical feedback or negative feedback, this author made the claim that her autism impedes her writing, and so the overuse of exposition is info dumping, and her character is also neurodivergent, so in the special interest of the character is this world apparently, and then they're info dumping. So the overuse of exposition was because of that. Myself and quite a lot of other people were very critical of that, talking about how that's kind of like a cop out and a little bit insulting, implying that neurodivergent people are going to inherently have these flaws in their writing. I used the word offensive in my last video because I did take offense to that as somebody who publishes independently like they do and who's also neurodivergent, maybe not in the same diagnosis, but we have very, very similar symptoms. So I did take that a little bit personally, but I just wanted to have this honest conversation with folks because the comment that was left on the video that I made about Audra Winters came from somebody who said they weren't neurodivergent themselves, but they didn't understand how being neurodivergent affects your lived experience or affects your writing or anything like that. They just express that they don't understand how people who are neurodivergent are inherently different from people who aren't. I am assuming that this comment came from maybe a younger person, maybe somebody who doesn't really have any other neurodivergent people around them. So I just kind of took it upon myself to decide to give you all a little bit of an education on that. I'm going to only be speaking on my personal experiences as somebody with bipolar disorder, bipolar 2 more specifically. So I'm just going to talk about my lived experience. I can't speak on other people's lived experiences. I'm only talking about myself. But I thought this is something that could be interesting or maybe helpful for other writers who find themselves in the same boat. So let's get into it. Okay. Being bipolar, what does that mean? What does that look like? Huge disclaimer, everyone's experience is different when it comes to being bipolar or having bipolar 2. I am not the perfect example of what everybody deals with because people's symptoms manifest in different ways, but I can just tell you about my lived experiences. So, okay, let's talk about what bipolar 2 disorder even is. It is a mood disorder. So, what does that mean? So, I experience mood swings used to used to experience mood swings that would range from very, very high, and then very, very low. And I would interchange between these highs and lows cyclically. Sometimes people's cycles look different. Some people stay in a really, really high state for a very long time and then come down to a normal state and then go to the depressive state for a very long time as well. Some people cycle through a little bit quicker than that. Sometimes people can spend years in these sorts of moods, whereas other people only spend maybe a couple months, a couple weeks, whatever. I was somebody who cycled through these moods pretty rapidly. When I started tracking my moods, I noticed that I would spend a couple weeks at a time at each state, with the highs being less frequent than the lows. So because of that, that's why I was diagnosed as bipolar 2. So bipolar 2, there's two different types of bipolar disorder. The first one experiences the same cyclical moods, but they're more likely to fall into states of mania. It's really stigmatized, and unfortunately, like in media, it doesn't have the best or healthiest depictions of a manic state. But basically, if you're manic, you experience elevated moods. So things you can feel either joy or extreme confidence or even extreme, like sometimes you're really on edge. Everything just feels like it's kicked up a lot. You might experience a lot of productivity at this time, so like you are working for hours and hours and hours without sleep. You might experience more risk taking behaviors that are outside of the norm of your normal comfort zone. A lot of people, this kind of manifests in some people who might like maybe spend a lot more money when they're in a manic state than they normally would. Sometimes they participate in more risk taking activities like adrenaline junkie seeking, diving into like maybe taboo things like, having a lot more sex or, experimenting with drugs and alcohol, stuff like that. And then, you have your normal state. And then when you have a low, it's more of like a depressive state. So those symptoms are very similar to people who have depression, where everything feels very, very slow. You might have not a lot of energy to give. You need a lot of motivations to get even basic tasks done. You kind of can feel nothing, or you can feel really, really sad, or there's other like more severe forms of that where you might be thinking about self-harm in some way, right? So that's kind of the big range for someone with bipolar 1. Someone with bipolar 2 like me is more likely to experience hypomania. So it's like a reduced version of mania where you still have those elevated moods and you can have those symptoms, but they're not as strong as maybe somebody with bipolar 1. Or with your cycle, you're more experiencing the lows more frequently than you are the hypomania. So for me, the hypomania would not last as long as the low states. They would only last for maybe a week at most. And during this time, I was still able to like control my risk, like my impulses for risk. And I won't go into like what I was dealing with because that's a little personal. But yeah, so sometimes that would lead to like irritability on the day to day. Not very often, but like my sleeping patterns were interrupted, or sometimes like I found myself being really productive during those times. So it felt good, right? Or there'd be times where I would just be so giddy and so happy. And that's something I want to touch on later too. I would just be so giddy and happy all the time and be filled with this almost euphoric feeling. I would be super, super confident. Oh my God. I thought I was like the prettiest bitch in the world when I was in those states. And then when I would be in a low state, because it's kind of like crashing, it's kind of like a sugar rush almost. When you go back low, the lows feel not so great. And then you kind of look around being like, what happened? But then I would experience depression like symptoms at that time too, in between. And then I'd probably have like a normal week or two. So yeah, my mind fluctuated with the weeklies. Something that I don't think is talked about enough when it comes to like bipolar disorders in general is that like the physical toll it takes on your body. It's not just like a mental thing, but you know, on average, people with bipolar disorder, if they go untreated, have an increased risk of dying sooner because of all the highs and lows that they experience in their physical body and the stress that it takes from going from all these extreme emotions. Yeah, there is a physical toll on your body for that. So it is a serious disability. Even if you don't experience like the more extreme versions of these symptoms, long lasting, this could be a debilitating thing. And I didn't get diagnosed until like my mid 20s, but, I look back now and realize that, like, yeah, some of my more erratic behaviors could probably be explained by that. Or I'm somebody who has very, very rich and very, very strong emotions compared to my peers that I just thought meant that, like, I was always called moody, like, but I thought I was just being a Cancer. Surprise, surprise. Surprise, surprise. You know that audio. Anyway. I thought I was just being a Cancer. I thought I was just a moody teenager. I just thought I was like angsty. I just thought a million different things. But it turns out my brain is just wired differently than other people's. And I found that out because a parent of mine actually got diagnosed with that coupled with some other stuff. But my parent was diagnosed with that. When you have bipolar disorder, there's an 80% chance of you passing it on to your children. So something to keep in mind if you too have bipolar disorder like I do. So, yeah, all that contextual evidence, that's kind of what that means. And in general, for my symptoms, I kind of explained the highs and lows of the cyclical thing. Yeah, just in general, like I am also very sensitive to things. So I have very, very, like I mentioned, very, very strong emotions compared to my peers. I tend to be a little dramatic. I also, like in general, I have other sensitivities to like a stimuli like sensory things, or like I really don't like crowds. I get overwhelmed very easily, very flustered very easily. Sometimes it's hard for me to maintain relationships, just like friendships and stuff, because sometimes things just feel kind of overwhelming. But yeah, so that's why. And see, do you see how like what I described kind of overlaps with some other things like autism? It's interesting because a lot of bipolar symptoms and lived experiences overlap with autism. So that's why it's like people have recommended that I get screened, but I'm also kind of like, well, I don't know. But anyway, anyway, so there's that. Now, how does that interfere with me as an author and my writing, right? Like that's basically what you guys really want to know. Before I was medicated, it would be very, very, very difficult for me to really focus on a task without it feeling like overwhelming. It was hard for me to get work done in general, but also hard for me to get work done in conjunction with also like doing stuff like chores around the house or like taking care of myself. Like when I was in a depressive state, it would take me so much, like it would take me like an hour of motivation just to take a shower, right? So like when you live with that kind of like low energy, it's really hard to think about like, oh, I need to, take care of myself, feed myself, make sure I'm doing okay. And also, like, oh, yeah, I got to pump out a certain word count for a book. And then when you don't meet that benchmark when you're writing, it feels like really crappy because you look at everybody else and you're like, well, why can't I just do what that? Why are these people writing so quickly? Why are these people getting more stuff done? Like, why can't I do that? Like, what's wrong with me? Right. So it turns into like a lot of like a lot of negative self-talk, unfortunately, and that kind of spirals into other stuff. So yeah, there'd be days where like just me doing chores around the house felt like work. And it is work. It's like labor and stuff, but for me like especially when I was in my low periods, it just was too much. So yeah, it can really affect your productivity. Likewise, when I mentioned being in the highs, again, weren't super common for me, but when I would be in a high and I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm killing it, and like I have a crazy high word count for today and I'm like making up for lost time, right? And I tell myself it's really, really good, right? I would reread it, like whatever I did when I was outside of that hypomanic state, and I'd be like, wow, this kind of sucks. When you're in that state, like, yeah, you're getting a lot of work done, but the quality of it might not be great because you're not engaging in critical self thought about like what you're doing. You're just like, I'm just getting stuff done. So it's like a double edged sword, right? And then you only have like a week of normalcy where you're like, okay, I'm trying to pin together these two parts of myself that are really like not helping me out right now. And you're trying to rein it in and almost edit as you go, right? So it's just like in terms of productivity, like my word counts since being on medicine have actually improved. My word count, like, so I used to have to struggle bus to get like 1,000 words a day. That would be really me overexerting myself to get 1,000 words a day. Whereas now, like now that I'm on medicine, I can crank out 1,500 words without even thinking. Night and day difference. It takes me about 2 or 3 hours to get to 1,500 words, right? So like maybe an afternoon of just straight writing. But back then I could not even fathom doing that. It would take me all day to maybe hit 500, and again, it was like a focus issue, but it was also an energy issue, and it was a lot. So like huge difference in my word count since being on my medicine. Also being on my medicine, I feel more grounded and together and like with it. There's also like something interesting that I didn't pick up on, but other people did. And this is why I was a little empathetic to Miss Audra Winters. But when I was doing my first draft of my first book, I started it when I was 19. So I was already moody, and I just thought it was because I was like leaving my teenage years and I still had a teenage brain at the time, right? But I was working on it again post pandemic. So that would have been like 2020 or 2021. And I was writing the characters, and creating this world and doing interactions between them, right? But then when I gave my writing to some other people to read, one of the feedbacks I got was like, this is really dramatized. Like every conflict is so over the top. Every every conflict is like unnecessarily big, and these people are getting so upset at something so little, right? Which I was like, oh, okay. Like I thought these emotional reactions, that's like how I would react to something, right? But then I found out that a lot of my characters were doing the most according to some of my readers. So I really had to scale back and really think about like, okay, is this an appropriate response to like what's going on right now? So that was like extremely helpful, and it got me out of my own mindset, and it helped me realize like, oh dang, like I'm writing through my own perspective, sure, but like if I'm not specifically writing a character with this sort of mood disorder, then this isn't going to hit with the readers the same way it would like if I'm doing bipolar reps specifically. And not enough people might realize that if, since I do have this like disability, that this is coming out. So I really had to edit myself in a way to be super cautious of like every sort of emotional scene or conflict in the book, which it was like an adventure story, dark fantasy story. So it's like, well, there's going to be a lot of that. So I had to make substantial edits, right? And that's why, like, when I looked at Miss Audrey Winters, at first I had a big emotional reaction to it. Like, I was like offended. But I realized, like, oh, she just didn't take the time to edit herself, right? Maybe she's correct and her brain is working this way. And this is why she's doing over exposition and info dumping. But the problem is like, you have to give that to readers who don't think like you or who aren't wired like you to see if this is normal to them or not. You know what I mean? Unfortunately, there's not a big percentage of folks with bipolar disorder. So it's not going to be normal to them. And I have to have the humility to edit myself and realize, okay, this is coming out this way because of this, right? So yeah, that's why I thought my perspective might be helpful in that scenario, because yeah, I was just giving everybody the same emotional reactions that I would have, right? Where everything felt like a big deal. Oh my god, I couldn't even tell you. Every argument, like every negative thing that could have happened felt like the end of the world to me before I learned how to like manage my emotions, because I came from a very unstable household and I never really learned emotional regulation until I was an adult in therapy, and I'm so thankful for having those skills now. But before I was emotionally regulated, like, oh, I was a hothead. Everything pissed me off. Everything would just like, oh, and if you met me now, you would not think that whatsoever. Like, I can tell how much growth I've had because I've had other people come up to me after interacting with me and being like, "Oh my god, you're so patient." And I was like, that is not a word that would have described me like 10 years ago. So I'm so thankful for that, because I was the antithesis of patient really, really back then. So I've had a lot of personal growth and improvements in that department. But yeah, being a live wire, being dramatic, having this sorts of personality traits can impede your writing and can like blur your perspective on your characters, because what you consider as normal from your perspective isn't normal to everybody else. And it's important to keep that in mind if you are a neurodivergent writer, or if you have a disability like this, to just kind of keep that in mind. If you want to write characters that are canonically having the same disorder as you have, then yeah, write whatever you want, whatever comes naturally to you. That's totally fine. But if that's not your aim, then maybe it helps to get outside perspectives to make your character relatable to other people besides yourself. So, yeah, those are the two major things, is like productivity, and then like voice, I guess, is something that I've really had to work on. Also, like handling critique and feedback. Like I mentioned before, I was a very emotional person, and sometimes I would not react very well to critique in general or like edits made by somebody else. Now I have the patience to really like think through that and like breathe before my initial feelings come out. And a lot of again, my emotions, like since being on medicine, feel smaller. Like they feel more manageable. I don't feel it in my body anymore, because when I would be upset, it felt like every nerve in my body was like activated all at once. I don't feel that anymore. Like I have a lot, my emotions are far more manageable now. I don't have mood swings anymore. It's been wonderful, really. And my interpersonal relationships have really, really gotten better, because I can think through my arguments now instead of being like caught up in a feeling before. And It's especially hard being female presenting or being a woman and having a mood disorder like this, because the world is already telling you like you're irrational, right? And like, girl, I I was doubling down. I was like, no, I'm not. I'm completely sane in this moment. What are you talking about? Blah 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 blah. And maybe I was not. So it's very difficult, right? But I know more about myself. I've explored myself, and my medicine is again making it so much easier for me to live in my body and experience these things. So I highly recommend it. I'm not trying to push for everybody to get medicated. If that's not your jam, fine. But I'm just speaking as my lived experience, because I was somebody who fought medication for a long time because of like the stigma around it. And I thought that I could just like do breathing exercises and like peace and love my way out of my mental illness. And when I got on medicine, I like literally learned like, oh my God, like this is what I've been missing out on. Like I didn't realize how hard my life was until I got medicine. And I was like, oh damn. There's some things I miss. Like I told Douglas, my husband Douglas, the one thing that I really do miss is sometimes feeling that joy that I felt when I was in like an elevated mood. I cannot describe to you like how wonderful it felt sometimes to be in just like a state of complete bliss. And I don't feel that anymore. But I miss it, but like not in like a sense where I'm like wanting to go back to everything just to feel that feeling again. Because like no, I don't miss it that much, girl. Like I still feel happiness, I still feel joy, I still feel like the joy of living in the moment. I still feel all of that, but it is different now, right? It's different. And I just wanted to like mention this because in terms of like bipolar representation, I watched the Marvel movie Thunderbolts recently, and that movie got mixed reviews. It got mixed reviews from Marvel fans. I in particular really enjoyed it. I thought it was different from the traditional Marvel formulaic shit. I'm also a sucker for found family, so maybe that's why. But there's a character in that movie, and I don't think they outwardly say that they're bipolar, but their powers and their personality would indicate that to me so hard. I think his name's Bob in the movie, and I'll put pictures of him up here just so you guys know what I'm talking about. And I won't spoil anything for you, but like Bob is also a genetically enhanced like super person. And the way his powers work is that like he's like his usual self, right? But then something activates in him where he becomes this like bulletproof type superhero, like OP, unstoppable superhero, right? And the way he described when he what he feels when he's in that power, I shit you not, was word for word of what I used to explain to my husband, like what it felt like in those moments. And like when I saw it, I was like, oh my God. And then unfortunately, like when he uses his powers, then there's also this dark side that takes over where it becomes dangerous to himself and people around him. And the range between the two and the way it was illustrated, I felt so seen. And I haven't felt that in a hot minute. But yes, so if you want to see like a artistic interpretation of bipolar disorder, I would really watch that Thunderbolts movie and pay attention to Bob, because for my opinion, just my opinion, I can't speak for everybody else with this condition, but my opinion, I thought that was illustrated so beautifully. So I felt seen in this character, and I really enjoyed the movie because of that. So yeah, so that's kind of like what I wanted to impart on you guys, is to just, be mindful because there are people who think differently than you. There's people whose brains are wired differently than you. They put out different chemicals than you, and that will trigger into their art, right? Because it does shape your perspective. It shapes the way you think about the world. Like I said, prior to my medicine, I really felt like everything was so high stakes in the world, right? I felt that even in any sort of interpersonal conflict between myself and a friend, or myself and a lover, or myself and a relative, felt like do or die. And when you constantly live in that agitated state, it takes a toll on how you perceive others and see the world, and how you also see yourself, right? And so, of course, if you're an artist or if you're a writer, that's going to manifest in your work in some way, shape, or form. One thing that's beautiful about bipolar disorder, I know I've talked a lot of about a lot of the hardships of it, but one thing that's beautiful about bipolar disorder is that statistically, a lot of people with bipolar disorder do become artists, or they become painters, they become writers. They statistically, a lot of them are incredibly creative, and they put out wonderful work because just living the way you do, you're prone to like self-reflection, and like so you experience like the full range of human emotions in a short amount of time constantly. So that helps you tap into some of the genuine feelings of others in a way, like not like an empathy way, but like you fully understand the scope of sadness, right? You can do sometimes for me, I didn't always do casual sadness, right? But I could go casual sadness or extreme sadness. I would do casually happy or extremely happy. Like you have the fucking pinwheel is spinning, my dude. You understand emotions in a way that is so enriching and deep, but also because you have these highs of productivity and confidence, it's more likely that you're going to be brave enough to put your work out there, right? At a certain period of time. You're going to have the courage to put your work out there. You're going to have the spontaneity to really believe in yourself and believe in other people and do the damn thing. But also, even when the depressive states, even though they suck, you really think about like you're really critical of yourself. But that can also be constructive in a way because you take the rawness of feeling an emotion and expression, and then you feel it on both extremes, and then there's the middle where you can take what you've learned and use it as critique. So I don't know what I'm trying to articulate this in the best way I can. I feel like I'm not doing it correctly, but basically you feel the full range of human emotion and experience, and even if it's rational or irrational, girl, you feel it. And then you also have the time to have the confidence when you're elevated to do what you need to do to put it out. If it's channeled in a healthy way, it can be great. And there's some people that unfortunately like purposely trigger hypomanic or manic states in themselves because they want to push out a deadline. They want to do this. And there are things you can do to trigger a manic experience. I don't feel like I should really share that with you guys because I don't want to encourage people to do that. But there's things you can do to trigger those things. So people will try to get as much done, put it out there, but then like the crash is never fun. But the crash also teaches us like the same way the confidence teaches us things, sometimes the lows and the crashes and the trying to make sense of the human experience and the lows of like how shitty the world is can also be pulled out as inspiration. So then when you're normal, you can, I don't know, you just think about everything you felt and then you try to put words to it and then bing bang boom, you make art. So yeah, interesting fun fact, a lot of bipolars are naturally very creative, and bipolar people are naturally very creative and artistic. My relative that I mentioned earlier, my parent that is bipolar, incredibly creative. That's one thing, and one positive thing I will say about them is that they are also inclined to they are visual artists. They're a visual artist and they're also like a musician. So that's something that like reinforces that stereotype, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, so then I found myself also gravitated to writing, and I used to paint and draw, and I was also like not anymore, but I was a visual artist at one point in time. I'd like to get back into that. I think I would still enjoy it, but not so much as a visual artist now, but I am a writer. So yeah, that's kind of like the gist of what I wanted to say. I know this video is kind of long-winded, and hopefully I can edit it down to make more sense for you guys. But yeah, that's what it's like being a writer with like bipolar disorder. And like I said, a lot of the issues I was facing before have been greatly reduced because of my medication, but I still have this disability and I still like live in this body, right? So it does everything I've learned about myself since being in therapy and since growing, and maybe some of the wisdom comes with age as well, who knows. But I've had such a rich and fulfilling experience about getting to know myself, not only as an artist and a writer, but as a person, and learning how I interact with society as a whole. How do I interact with other people, and then how do I communicate and express myself with other people, and not only a way that's true to who I am, but that's healthy in its communication itself. So yeah, lots to think about. Lots to think about. Being neurodivergent isn't just like, something you put in your Instagram bio. I just wanted to give a more honest interpretation of what it's like being a neurodivergent person, in particular somebody who has bipolar disorder and somebody who's a creative as well. And hopefully this answers the questions that comment left on my previous video. And if you also have a similar diagnosis to mine, let's talk about our experiences. Feel free to leave a comment down below and about your experience. If you agree with some of the stuff I said, if you have a different experience than what I've had, please let me know in the comments down below. If you like this video, feel free to like it, comment down below, share it with a friend, or subscribe to the channel. Please, please, please. That would help me out a lot. I also have memberships for anybody that's interested who wants to get a more personal, interactive experience with me as a writer on my channel. So, yeah, thank you so much for watching. And until next time, thanks. Bye.